Mic check, mic check, mic check.
Yeah, mic check.
Hmm.
I can hear you, Richard.
I know, sorry. I'm just trying everything here. I thought it would cut me. I thought it would cut me. It'll allow me to do the normal pre-entry thing. So apologies.
Oh, it didn't do that?
It did not. So I just hopped in. So,
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, I know. It's embarrassing. So are you going to be upset if I drink a beer while we're doing this?
You're being recorded.
In that case, I'm a teetotaling Mormon.
I can cut that before it goes.
Thank you. It is at altitude, so it hits a little quicker. How did Tuesday go?
Went well, except I forgot to record the morning session.
That will happen. I know how that goes. I've gone through an entire hour, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, where's my record of this? So.
And I'm going to admit people and turn off the waiting room, and they can just come in.
Yep.
We'll give people another minute or so before we get started.
Yeah, this is Dave. I may switch over to the computer. It wasn't coming up, but it is now. So.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, how are you?
You're good. Let me turn up my speaker.
I know several people aren't going to make it tonight, but they've dropped in their comments already, so we have those to go through.
Ann, you ready to take notes?
Yeah, I am.
Right on.
We actually do auto transcribing at the end, so.
Cool.
I'm here to learn.
Have you seen the other ones that we've done? Have you gone through those at all?
I'm gonna have to catch up.
Okay. Yeah, you're on the last one.
Yeah, this is Ann's first time in, and she wasn't aware of it, but she's been involved with development for a long time. So she's going to be right at home.
So you won't have any problem with the content.
No.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. If other people come in, they can just jump in wherever we're at. So we're going to go ahead and start off with a check-in. And Richard, do you have a question for us today?
No, I'm sorry I missed on Tuesday. I was actually looking forward to it, but I had a conflict.
Just
no,
a check-in question. Just
any question. Okay. We talked about letters. We've talked about, how about this? When are we going to be doing science projects? How about that? We should be able to, if we think about Gilligan's Island and, generating power and running the washing machine and the professor and coconuts, I think there's got to be some way we can plug all that into some freshman, science fair project with all the kids that we're going to be attracting. How about that?
So a check-in question around science fairs and bicycles.
Yes.
Oh,
Science fairs and bicycles.
Oh, now you're going to be stretching people's brain power here. So you're going to have to go first on this one, Richard.
Well, okay. Remember this: when we use energy, we generate power. When we generate power, we go down the road. And so what we should be able to do is plug that, take it from a, we should be able to take our CompuTrainers or ergometers of any type and plug them into light bulbs and get kids to power light bulbs and show how efficient they are and how much work is required to generate a light bulb. And then they'd have to do it for 1 minute and 2 minutes and 3 minutes and 4. And that way they get hooked because it's all about STEM, right?
Well, we're going to throw it over to the engineer next, Mr. Grills.
Gee, thanks. Thank you much. Let me go ahead and start video here since I've switched over from phone to home. I don't know. Let's see. What would I do? Some of my favorite things to do, because I'm track oriented. So being at the velodrome, I talk a lot about using the banking, and when you're up high on the banking and down low on the banking, that you've got a big battery. So it's storing up the energy to get to the top of the banking and then using it as you come down the banking to pick up speed. So that's one of my favorites. But you got to remember, I am a rocket scientist now. So I just want to let you all know.
Right on.
So the question that Richard is posing for our check-in tonight is about STEM and bicycles. So we're stretching our brain power. Mr. Hastings, you can go next.
If it's STEM and it's bicycles, then obviously we're going to do something down at the University of Washington with the wind tunnels and aero design.
Very cool.
All about those pitot tubes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kyle.
Hello, everyone. I got nothing. Just pass on by me.
I got actually accolades for Kyle. I actually caught Kyle's dust with his team the other day because they went and climbed the mountain behind the house from the bottom to the top, and all you saw was blue jerseys. I mean, blue jerseys and dust. It was pretty freaking amazing. It reminded me of the 90s, the early 90s with that Trek Volkswagen team that they nicknamed the Rocket Boys, which is what I left in the comment when they made it all the way to the top. I mean, they weren't even winded. I was just like, wow.
Yeah,
So there's your power to weight ratio right there.
There you go. Thanks.
All right, Anne.
I'm trying to come up with something for gravity. So, well, I'm going to say that I will use that speed is your friend. So gyroscopes. So the ability to stay upright requires the gyroscopic effect of the wheels. I don't know.
That'd be a great science project.
Alistair Adams.
He must have stepped away.
All right, we'll skip over and go to Mr. Reppert.
Well, real quick, if I can. And you just got to tell them it's easier to go fast than it is to go slow.
Very true. Very true.
Dave, you just stole my thunder. The faster you go, the easier it is. And that comes from being on a velodrome as well, right? The faster you go, the easier it is to ride that thing.
Good point.
All right, Joe Holmes. Got anything STEM related?
I joined late. I'm trying to catch up. I think I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom with Kyle and hope you don't call on me for the rest of the endeavor. That's what I got, Sean.
It's not my question. It's Richard's question.
It's either talk about that or we could have a food fight in the lunchroom.
Definitely not the rocket scientist on the call then.
Hey, Joe, you just gave your answer. It's easier to sit in and draft than it is to pull and lead.
Ah, yeah. Okay, I like it.
There you go. There's your science experiment.
That was gonna be mine. Alistair, you with us now or no?
I'm riding my bike.
Oh, okay.
But I'm stopped at a light, and so my science experiment is wind resistance and teaching people how to save energy by drafting.
Great. Mari, our check-in is STEM and bicycles.
Oh, goodness. I would have to agree with Alistair. I would also do something with wind resistance.
And Freddie.
Oh, Freddie, fast Freddie. Yeah, cool.
You there, Freddie?
Freddie's got kids. He should.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah.
I just got in. What was the question?
It's about STEM activities and bicycles.
Ooh, STEM activities and bicycles. Wow. What we were just working on. Yeah, just simple, just trying to rebuild, what we were just doing with the kids, brake pads. They were out of adjustment and trying to figure out how to put them in adjustment and, getting it all to work and, applying a little bit of science and trial and error into getting something, the simple thing of a brake to the calipers to work on each side. How do you, does that make sense? Is that science-based?
That's good enough.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
really our check-in. He's making us, Richard made us expend some brain power on this one. And
Oh, wow.
Katie.
So, yeah. I wasn't ready for this.
And Katie.
Hey, Sean, Katie Burford. I guess you guys are doing science projects. Is that the question?
Yep.
Okay. Well, so my 5th grader actually did last year. He did a science project on tops versus drops. And he measured the difference coasting down a hill. Took 10 friends and they all coasted down the hill in their tops and then coasted in their drops and figured out the difference.
Very cool.
Perfect. That's exactly what we needed to know. That's right. I think that was a good question to get things started.
It was, yeah, it was a little brain power there. So you should be able to see the slide deck now. Let me get this out of the way. And let's see, there we go. So we're just going to go through and kind of answer people's questions about these things. And there's people who've already put in comments, some of the people that can't be here today. And the first one on this, even on this first slide, Jim Schneider brought up, and he already emailed me that he can't be here tonight, is that I didn't have fun put it in anywhere. So let's just keep that in mind. We need to get fun somewhere into this performance programming. We're talking about performance programs. We've come up that that's really ages 15 to 18 and collegiate riders. And just as everybody can recall, we have a very large ecosystem to our sport, much larger than most sports. And unfortunately, the different groups tend to silo themselves off, and they don't necessarily communicate very well with each other. And one of the big things that we've talked about over the weeks is that we as coaches can interface with a lot of those different silos and help kids navigate our sport. So moving on, I had made this slide a week or so ago, and I put it down as overarching goals that we needed to demonstrate that cycling is an organized sport and to legitimize the sport. And this is very general. And Pete Weber put in that that is this really a goal? Maybe another way to say it is comparing to traditional sports or something along those lines. So maybe goal is the wrong word here. Anybody have any thoughts?
I think the word goal is fine. I don't think people think of cycling as a sport. I think people think of cycling as a sport later. They look at it as, freedom, mobility, utility, and then activity, and then sport.
Okay, so leaving it as a goal is okay. So, I mean, I think of it as the goal is to demonstrate that cycling is an organized sport. The goal is to legitimize our sport. This is kind of the way I was thinking about this slide.
I agree with that.
Any other thoughts?
The goal really is to make people love cycling. Okay, so whether it's a kid or an adult or a parent or whoever else, it's to get somebody to love the sport, not just to legitimize it. And then, you know, the other one is to, I don't know, I guess acceptance. Maybe that fits into legitimize. So
How do I insert a new slide? Insert new slide.
okay, I do have a quick thing on the balloon slide.
Yeah, I can't change the balloons here, but I can put comments on it and then be able to change them. They were made in PowerPoint.
I understand, but the balloon slide, to me, you need to take the things that kind of fit together and put them closer together.
Oh,
So
that takes work.
Well, I understand, but BMX cycling is track cycling and mountain bikes, you know, and mountain bikes. So those should be kind of close to each other. And track cycling and road cycling are interrelated. And
right.
You follow where I'm going. So you've got a continuum of more competitive to less competitive as you go around your circle.
Yeah, I typed them in randomly. That was how I typed them as the words flowed into my brain. So
and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that the thought process is the things that link closer, you can have the little bit of overlap between the outer ones. You follow where
sounds like to me you need to give him access to the slides and let him do it.
Oh geez, no, I don't want that.
Sorry, I forgot to do that. I meant to do that. Everybody's supposed to have access to the slides. Thank you, Katie.
We'll get there. I'm just thinking how you kind of quarter the circle now.
I'm with you, Dave. I'm just trying to make you do the work.
Oh, thanks.
Can we make it not look like a COVID molecule, please?
Yes, that too.
It's just a little scary. You know, it's not a birthday cake. So
I'm putting goal as fun here. What you had some other word for that, Dave?
Another word for fun?
Look, maybe you change that to joy. I don't know. You know, the joy of cycling. It pulls things in.
The sense of accomplishment.
You know, and that's
purpose. About purpose.
That's a good one. Some of these have been said before. It just, you know, we need to get it down.
Adventure.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Mastery.
Good point.
Some of that stuff comes out in the actual goals of the ADM 4, but this is kind of overarching, you know, just as a lead in.
More of a
I didn't want to go too far into that because we got other more important things to get through too. So Richard, you had some comments about this slide, and again, this slide was just done, you know, really on the fly just to get the idea across. Right. It needs a lot of work, you know, for when after this and when I compile this into a final thing, what I want to do is actually overlay ADM on top of this and then be able to actually put some of those silos in and kind of try to figure out where they start fitting in the blocks. Like, for example, I talked with Outride yesterday and they were kind of like, where do we fit in? You know, where do we fit in the process? And I'm like, well, you're kind of like ADM 2, you know, kind of thing, ADM 3 because of the age groups.
I was thinking when I saw this slide, the slide made a lot of sense. The slide is great. Capacity, developmental age. You know, we've talked about this in coaching summits, you know, for years and years. But I think some people they don't migrate to training. They basically go from balancing to pedaling to travel or utility or mobility.
Right.
And we're all of the age, most of us are, that, I mean, is there anybody here under 30 in this group? Okay. The reason I ask that is that, you know, I think our generation may have been the last generation that was kind of expected to ride our bikes to the tennis courts or to the schools or other things like that. And it wasn't long after that the you know, what later became known as helicopter parenting sort of took over. And you basically had children riding on the sidewalks, if anywhere, or riding in the empty basketball courts, if anywhere. And they weren't really going anywhere. But if we can get people to migrate from again, the concept of learning how to ride, and I have taught adults how to ride. There's more adults that don't know how to ride than ever. And then we say, okay, well, now we're going to, I mean, I mentioned this a week or two ago, but we're going to take a trip to the ice cream store. Well, it's only 2 blocks, but we're going to go. That's a big step for them. But if we can give them that confidence and competence as coaches or instructors, the pool broadens, even though it may be more shallow. And of course, what we hope is that more butts on bikes yields more interest in the activity beyond the 12 hours a year that the National Sporting Goods Association shows most bikes get ridden in the first year of purchase. So think about that, 12 hours a year. If we can get beyond that, then we can really get higher retention rates, and that's my goal by moving them to mobility and travel.
So Richard, you pontificated a bit.
I did.
But I think we're missing 2 or 3 steps, and it's balance bike pedaling. And then basically I would put like a mobility, and then I'd put fitness, then I'd put training, and then I'd put freedom, and I'd put competing, or put competing / freedom together.
Yeah. Slide all those up and add mobility and or utility with freedom. And I think that would, I mean, if people stopped there and we were involved in growing cycling,
exercise, good.
To that point, exercise is fantastic.
And that goes in after, like after pedaling.
Yes.
Well, like I said, I've got to work on this, and
I understand.
I'm gonna nominate Richard to help me with it.
I'll be glad to. Right now. I would be honored. So that is perfect. That is great, because if we can do that, then again, there's a part in here later talking about coaching the coaches or creating more coaches and instructors. This is a component that we could grow with.
Yeah, there's some other things that are layered in, some of, I think, Pete's comments that come in later on that are important for that piece of building new coaches.
There's a point in here too that you can separate this into what I would call a trainer, a mentor, a coach.
Right.
Each of those have a different part of the phase of going up this thing. So below the line, balance bike and learning to pedal and stuff is a trainer, meaning somebody who's going to train somebody how to do it.
Oh, I see.
And then developing the love of the sport is really almost a mentor. And then when you move to exercise and training, you need a coach. And I think that kind of fits together, and it helps set up a level of what you need. You don't need a coach to do balance bike stuff.
All right.
You don't need a coach to coach proper pedaling and how to do a bike rodeo. Okay. To learn the love of the sport, you need a mentor. You need somebody who's going to be there that loves the sport, that pulls you with them.
Exactly.
And then after you've got that, you need a coach to develop your skills. And I'm developing this as I'm saying it, so I apologize if I'm speaking too much.
No, this is
You're on target.
For me.
Very good.
Yeah. Would you add the word instructor in there? Because I think that could be a title that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it fits there with trainer.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean, this is Joe. Not to be too pedantic, but I've always put in the hierarchy of things a mentor above a coach. I think that there are a lot of quote unquote coaches out there who've hung out their shingle and I'm a coach. But to truly be a mentor to me is higher on the food chain. Or equal, at least equal.
Because they're lower on the food chain doesn't mean they're any less important.
Right. And again, I might just be being too pedantic here, but just kind of my 2 cents or 1 cent, as it were.
I'm just going to put coach plus for now. There's multiple levels to coaching.
All I know is I wouldn't have really started cycling if it wasn't for the 2 junior high school teachers I had that started a cycling club. Okay. Well, that's why I put them down there, and I don't put them down there as anything less important than any of the coaches and fine tuners I had. But if I didn't have them, I wouldn't have gotten started where at the level I started, and that was at 12 or 13 years old, going to the at about stage 2.
Well, like I said, Richard, you're going to work with me and we're going to revise
Yeah,
that.
I'll do
slide.
that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool. That's cool.
Okay. So then,
Everybody here is a
Don,
mentor.
I wanted to add a little thing about is it more about setting, because here's my whole problem with the whole development model is like, I almost feel like we're trying to force it, because as we were talking about, when we were kids, it just kind of happened organically. It was just intuitive that we did these things. So, I mean, I'm going to give you an example. I was sitting here with my son on the weekend, and we're throwing the baseball out in the front yard. And we switched where he was out on the street, because I was like, well, I don't want him to hit the neighbor's carts, so I'll put him on the street. And and I realized, this is a little dangerous. He's on the street, I'm on the sidewalk. But that's what we grew up, and that was like the beginning of our spatial awareness and understanding, because we all went out and played with our friends out in the street for hours, especially during the summers. And so we had these environments where we were able to learn through the process, instead of a process being set up for us. It was just a natural environment. So should this curriculum, part of the curriculum, be to hopefully create an environment so parents and mentors and coaches can allow the kids and the athletes.
we lost you there, Freddie.
But I think he was on to something.
Yeah. So, I mean, Freddie, hopefully you're still there, but the general synthesis of what we're trying to do is, we're trying to look at things from the 10,000 foot view. So we're not trying to put the kids into boxes at this point. We're just trying to understand what the landscape looks like. And then we can start thinking about, what should fit inside those boxes. And I think what you were getting at was that there's a very organic nature to our sport, and most sports actually, that requires a lot of flexibility, and a lot of that flexibility is lost in a lot of the things that we do. And I know that, in some of our earlier discussions, I think Chad brought it up very well regarding, the idea that you would take one key element and you're trying to teach that one key element, and then you're allowing for a lot of adventure during the course of whatever that session is. And then you're always coming back to that key element though. So you're reinforcing it. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at, Freddie, is that if you're there, you can pipe up later. But I do want to move on from this slide, because this stuff is fairly general at this point that we're trying to go through. And we want to talk about ADM 4 really tonight. So this just, shows the framework that we're kind of working in, that Kristen outlined for.
Yeah, I'm still here.
You're still there? You're breaking up though.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, I'm out on a walk. So I'll be a little bit in the hills so I could get spotty at times.
I mean, you can just go ahead and, send your comments along too, and we can get them integrated into the materials as we move forward. That's totally acceptable. Right now I just kind of wanted to hammer out this slide deck, and so, we had something for ADM 4 that we could kind of hang our hat on. So Kristen outlined, the ADM stages. This is the American Development Model. It may or may not be perfect for our sport. I'm not entirely sure. That's something that we can discuss later. And we have two different stages to this: participate and succeed, which is kind of the first level that they come into, and then stage 4, which is excelling it for high performance, which is much more of a traditional high performance that we think of. And really, they show it as being athletic experience 10+ years, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Our target audiences for this are ages 15 to 18 and U23, as well as crossover athletes that might be coming from other sports and have a lot of background. One of the key things that came out of our discussions, it's really those who are persistent, who are making it through to these levels, that are passionate and moving through. If you have any other comments about that, just go ahead and put them on the slide. You know, in terms of what we're hoping to do with these individuals coming through at this participation success stage, is socialize them, give them awareness and understanding of the pathway, get them to become self-sufficient. We're still talking about the life lessons through sport components, building skill or mastery of the sport. Building the engine is certainly part of it. And then exposure and empowerment, somebody put that in there. Pete Weber also put in the idea about leadership skills, which really I think goes into some of the things that Dave was getting at in terms of you're kind of building the mentorship pool and things like that. And then Chad talked about understanding training theory and periodization, which I think can, that can fit underneath this understanding of the pathway. The training component of that and periodization fits into under that square, it seems like. Any comments about this slide?
I think you've got to add goal setting. Leadership, and a separate one is goal setting and understanding the difference between a wish and a goal. Just make goal setting in there.
Something like that.
That's fine.
Because yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to goal setting. So
I agree.
And there will be other opportunities to come back to this stuff later on too. In terms of bike considerations, Pete actually said maybe we should switch this out to be equipment considerations. And then he had some other comments about, sponsorship now is coming into play. And then, that there's value and identity placed on sponsorship, and then loaner equipment. And maybe that comes under the affordability component.
I just worry that we're falling into tribalism.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Can you define tribalism for me, please? And
I worked with several junior teams in mountain biking up in Montana, and then was on the outside edge of some junior development teams in North Texas for road, and it basically ended up being tribalist. It was like, well, you don't want to talk to those people because they wear blue shirts, or you don't want to talk to those people because they wear red shirts. And the joke was, it reminded us of The Simpsons, where it was, Springfield versus Shelbyville. So I would rather be more generic and get everybody. Again, the only recent comparison I can give is that with the NICA event that I attended in 2019 in Reno, was very, very inclusive. Every team and club had their own tent, but everybody was mixing with each other's club. They were chitting, chatting and talking, and everybody seemed to be just happy to be there. That kind of thing. Sure, the racing was racing, but they also, it could have been held under a big circus tent. And I would think that might be a little bit, if we kept the energy off of equipment, we give up that rush for the technology hurdle, or what was it that was called, where you get the 10-year-old showing up with a $4,000 pair of zips and things like that. That was always kind of a frustrating thing to witness.
Yeah, well, that came up in a couple of the other discussions, and the question for me is, Richard, what do you ride?
I ride about an 8-year-old mountain bike that is kind of on its last legs, but while I'm looking, there's nothing available. Let me throw this out there.
You followed the question, though.
I'm sorry.
You followed the reason for the question.
I do, and I think there's something to that. But
it doesn't require a huge discussion now. It's just a thing, and I brought it up in one of the other meetings, and I said, Jim McIlvain, one of the editors for I think Mountain Bike, whichever mountain bike magazine it is,
whichever one's left.
He wrote a great editorial on loaning a bike, a really nice middle-level bike, to one of his neighbor's kids who was doing NICA. and the kid was still upset that he didn't have the top of the line super duper, and it was more than enough for him. And it's an issue that falls into this. We've got parents that are going to pay for things and parents that aren't. And how do you equalize that? So
my response to that is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, I don't think you have to. So I'm a mom who can't afford the nice bikes. And my 15-year-old showed up at the state championship mountain bike race this past year on a $300 hand-me-down bike and beat the kid on an $8,000 carbon fiber mountain bike. And I think that said enough. I don't think you have to equalize it. I think you instead teach the kids that, you know, the motor is what really matters, and that's in your legs.
I concur.
I would have to disagree. I mean, I think you got lucky that you probably found an athlete that wasn't as good as your son, so he was able to beat him. But imagine if he was going up and against an athlete that was equivalent to his skill and his talent, and he got beat because of equipment.
What about the
Well,
IROC?
we've had that happen too. We've had that happen too. But I think it's just life. I think that's just life, in my opinion.
And
you cannot equalize everybody. You can't. I mean, we live in America. Like, you're always going to have a kid who's richer than another kid.
Katie, I like you.
You just answer the question.
What do you mean? What would happen? He would probably lose, and I understand that. But what I'm saying is that's life.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like, I think, I mean, if this is kind of the whole idea with a long-term athlete development model, is to try to minimize those kind of, as you say, we live in America kind of ideas, so we can have longer and more connection with these athletes, so we can keep them involved and see that they actually have, and not be it's done because of a political or financial or whatever it is that got them to the top. We want as many kids as possible to have fun in the sport, and of course, those outliers that become our elite, we have more of those.
Oh, Freddie, I completely agree with you, and I hope. I mean, it would be awesome if that was the case, but I think it's just idealistic.
Well,
we are talking level 4 here.
This is level 4.
Kids have basically ADM 4, so kids have basically already made a commitment to the sport.
Well, these are the ones that are just entering competition.
We're
not into that next phase yet, where
I agree, but they put in something to get to this level.
Right.
And I think it's going to be easier to find used equipment or loaner equipment or other things than it would have been at some other level, or to just walk in raw. And so I think, my overall view is we're trying to get kids to want to be there at that point. And at that point, we help them as best we can. And so, again, overall equipment consideration, I think, is probably at a lower level for me than some of the other issues that come with going into that level. But
so let's go ahead and move on. I mean, I think we have enough here to go with. I mean, all the points are very valid, in terms of, how do we try to keep the kids engaged as long as possible, as Freddie was going to, when we know that we have great disparities in terms of what equipment may be available to the individual riders based on their socioeconomic backgrounds and availability too of equipment.
Throw used or something else on there, or secondhand, or because all of us know people that have stuff that they don't need. I'm looking around my room and I'm seeing all kinds of stuff I don't need, and I just moved trying to get rid of things.
Well, a program that'll take that stuff. We're not that far away.
I don't have that much cycling stuff that I don't need.
I guess my thing, though, is what I'm getting at is we need to help kids understand that hand-me-down equipment is not necessarily a bad thing. Because a lot of kids think in their head that if they don't have a brand spanking new bike, that they're not going to be as good as such and such on their brand spanking new bike. And that's just not true.
I mean, we could actually make that a topic that goes out for like a junior bike chat too. Cause like we had Mike Creed on the call the other night and we were talking about this, about, how can we have recycled equipment coming from pro teams? And he was like, well, I just picked up 6 frames that we had carbon fiber repaired and we're going to put them back into team use. Right. And I think a lot of kids may not understand that a lot of teams are actually doing that. They're repairing their old equipment and recycling it and actually using it. They're not just tossing it in the garbage.
Absolutely. And his team actually, so Avolo passes down their frames to my kid's junior team. And you want to know how excited my kid gets when he realizes he's riding Michael Hernandez's old bike. I mean, that's amazing to him.
Yeah. So let's just move on. So on program considerations, we had a long discussion about this on the first couple sessions. And, we figure at this level that half of your time is spent doing local type events, 30% regional, and then a little bit national and international. But a bulk of your time is actually spent racing at the local and regional level with only a small amount of travel, maybe 20% of the total. Is there any discussion about that? This is that kind of introductory level for ADM 4.
I guess it pre-necessitates the fact that, are there enough local events? Because I think that's the big crisis.
We're talking about an ideal situation here. We're not talking about what we're dealing with today.
Okay.
We know that there's a dearth of events. It's a problem.
Exactly. And Richard, again, local doesn't necessarily mean a race or a race event. It could be a club ride.
You're right.
A competitive club ride or something else. And we brought that up last week too.
Touché. Good point.
Yeah, so I'm jumping to that slide here. So, local programs that are ADM correct level skills plus training. And, Pete Weber actually brought up a lot of these are not so much events, but they are locations. So you're making sure that you have good locations to be involved in the sport. And he's saying perhaps a new slide. So yeah, we'll probably need to do that. But a lot of these, like race, like local group rides or the de facto race events. And there was a huge amount of discussion regarding, regional races being run by the clubs and, this idea of volunteerism, which has kind of fallen by the wayside. We didn't get into a huge discussion about, basically NICA type of programming where they are the event promoter and they define and control their ecosystem. But I think that's something to keep in mind. I'm muting you, Joe. And so they control their ecosystem, and that's something that doesn't exist on any of the other basically facilities, unless maybe some of the velodromes do that. I don't know. Dave, do you have velodrome programming like that? Yeah, he's nodding that you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muting so that if I scream at something, you don't hear me. No, everything looks good. And yes, the velodromes all tend to run their own events, whether it's through USAC or not. Whether it's training or racing and race nights and varied things. So it's good.
Yeah, and Richard typed in that NICA is more of a federation model, whereas the club method is more of a confederation or, a loose association. And so, I mean, that's something to consider, right? Moving forward is that you can almost think of building out these other ecosystems to handle each of the different disciplines or whatever you think is the best way to go. And, Pete had said it the other day is that really what we need is a robust pyramid, which is down here at the bottom, to provide leadership. And this is like from, a national level or regional level that can create those opportunities for the kids to actually come together. And he was talking a lot about using regional camp structure. And we talked a lot about what had happened in the past in Colorado, where they had a regional camp that they had run that brought the kids together in non-competitive ways that broke down those silos generated by the teams, which I think addresses some of those sponsorship related issues, right? Is that you put the kids together in a mixed atmosphere that's non-competitive and you're going to tend to build the friendships and things like that and break down those team silos, which do exist. They are real, and it is an issue. Interweaved with the types of events, there's been a lot of discussion over the years, in fact, of using speedways and other purpose-built facilities and venues. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that, it's hard to get road closures now. It's just very difficult and it's very expensive. And going into some sort of facility-based programming, like in a speedway, makes it a lot easier. It's just a one-stop shop type thing. And there are programs around the nation that already run underneath that format. And I did just get something today that the NADRP is having a 2-day webinar conference at the end of next week to specifically talk about event programming. And I'm going to try to go on that and try to interpose ideas about, that what we need for junior cycling in there. And then, we did have, and Mari's on the call, she can probably, maybe she can bring us up to speed. Maybe it's too early about where the regional ID camp program is going to go. But, they're, single day clinics, I think really fit nicely underneath this model. And Dave, certainly we've run these in the past here in Southern California with good success, bringing together multiple groups. And the kids still look fondly on those, even though they were held years ago. So those types of models work extremely well, and they're lower budget than doing a sleepaway camp and easier to coordinate.
But even like our weekends, our MLK weekend in Borrego was really good for the whole thing, and teaching skills, riding, and the brotherhood of cycling, I guess, the socialization. With SDBC coming in and working with especially the SDBC women, with the young women that we had, and things like that. It's just a huge thing.
Yeah. So some of those, like that one was supposed to be just a regular team camp, but we kind of interleaved, our squad with your squad and made it a little bit bigger, which I really agree with that type of format, because it teaches them to think a little more broadly. But there is that place for the team bonding experience and things like that, and I know others of you have run teams and done things like that. And so certainly doing team-based atmosphere versus doing more regionally based atmosphere, they have a different flavor to them. They both have their purposes, but then there's also the idea of running private camps, and I'm guessing that a lot of us on the call have run our own private camps in the past. And those do have a lot of merit too, because they can be very specialized and do very interesting things. So who's actually running the programming? Local cycling clubs is clearly something that we want to have happen, but you can also have school-based programs such as NICA, and I put down NICA bridging into ADM3, and David Tom brought up some of this last time, that NICA is more ADM3 bridging into ADM4. And I put them in ADM4 because they have that strong race component with it. But you also have collegiate cycling clubs, and then you have, the local association and national organization who runs events also. But you can have also private coaches running these things. And again, I just put down Pete's comment here that, we need to have a robust pyramid to provide leadership that create those different opportunities. And it has to be done, when you come back to that original slide kind of showing the continuum, it has to be done in a rigorous way. It can't be just left to chance.
Well, you got to throw in the local facilities. So, because there are a lot of things that are park based or velodrome based or trailhead based, that people know where they're going. So if there's a specific facility somewhere, they're usually the ones that end up running the programs, especially for kids.
Okay.
I'd say well above even the clubs.
Yeah. And this isn't necessarily in order, right? So Jim Schneider also put in that it's important to distinguish a local cycling club from a cycling team, because they have different they actually have different operational structures. I was talking with a club earlier today, about the operational structure of a club versus a team, and they are distinct. And so maybe it's important that we do list them separately.
It's almost like we need to figure out how to keep riders below, say, category 2 from being on a quote unquote team. I mean, and again, it's just the thought process. It's not something we need to stress, but it's almost like you get to that top level and you start trying to be supported. It changes an awful lot of your outlook and how you're being coached. So,
right.
So just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's something that we should be considering, especially when we start looking at that next ADM level, right? Is that you're no longer probably part of a club-based program at that point. You're probably on a team. And there was a lot of, I just threw in relevant coaches knowledgeable in the sport, which came from ADM 3. But, there's, Pete Weber put in here that there's need for experienced, trained, certified coaches, at this level. And then he was talking about there being a lack of coaching best practices from the NGB. And then a lot of things about diversity, diversity in the coaching being important, but it doesn't exist.
But then
Richard,
I also believe that at this point, you almost need specialized coaches for various things, because not one coach is going to necessarily be, I can't power meter coach, but I can sure tell you how to ride. So, you need to have a way of having coaches that can teach the thought processes, how to actually bike handle, versus the coaches that are teaching you weightlifting and building strength. I'm not saying that I can't do that, but I am saying that we need to diversify. There's not just one coach who can do all of this at this level. A good coach knows what he doesn't know, right?
Right. And Richard was talking about, some general things about coaching education that are offered. He says ASEP, but coaching, Positive Coaching Alliance has some materials in this space, as does True Sport has some modules that they've put together that are quite good, I think. And then here, Chris brought up, that we need to be able to connect coaches with the different types of organizations. And that was part of the reason why we put together the networking document, which, based on what Dave asked for. And so that's been sent out. And if you haven't gotten it, I sent it out through an email blast, and I can drop it in on here, or you can just send me an email and I'll send you that link. It's just a Google form. And then once you put yourself into the system, you can gain access to the spreadsheet on the backside, and you can see everybody else that's put their name in. And so then here, having that connecting coaches to organizations. And I think that's going to be a big piece of what we end up doing as a group, is being able to make those connections and doing it in a thoughtful way for those local communities, because it's a big task. The club I talked to earlier today was actually my old club, the Davis Bike Club. And so we were starting to talk about these things about youth development. It's like I started to think about who actually lives in the area that can really be of assistance in the specific ADM areas that they need. And it's not necessarily straightforward. In terms of a coaching toolkit, I just left it as question marks. Pete put in that NICA has the best coaching resources that exist now. I know that they exist with Canada and the Positive Coaching Alliance training courses, but that's those are fairly general now. Like Dave was saying, we need to start thinking about being more specific. And Chris brought in the USAC skills clinic outline. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to work with Richard and some others to kind of ramp that stuff back up. And I have quite a bit on the skills. I have quite a few documents on the skills development front that can go into that space. But I know that one of the other things that we're trying to do, and Chad's kind of taking the leadership on it, is we're going to try to develop an open source framework for materials, for curricula and coaching resources and things like that. We'll see how far that goes. It's really going to be dependent on what the community thinks, right? And who actually puts in materials. We'll just see what happens. But otherwise, we're going to have to develop toolkits moving forward. In terms of training regime, periodization, and I just left in the idea of kids are not small adults, but there is this idea of individual versus team coaches. And, you know, Joe really has a lot of thoughts about this, you know, about having to have higher training capacities in kids or in the races that they're doing, especially not necessarily here, but when you go to that next level for sure. When they're racing internationally, you're really going to see that. There's probably more diversity at this level. Joe, do you have something specific to say?
I mean, just kind of what we were talking about earlier, that it's, you know, you look at a power file from a kid that raced the Nation Cup in Europe, and they're going to do way more work overall than, say, a Pro 1 race at Redlands, for example. And we've seen, you know, anybody that was at the coaching summit where Billy Ennis gave that presentation and put the slide up of, I think it was Adrian Costa, maybe, of one of the stages of the Peace Race, and people were shocked at the amount of capacity that he needed to participate in that stage. So yeah, kids are not just small adults, but don't underestimate their training capacity. If anything, they probably recover quicker. I know they do around here more than me.
Joe, are you looking at during a race, or that's a quick question?
What I don't understand that. Sorry, flesh it out a little bit more for me.
Okay, so if you look at the power somebody put out, or the energy somebody used to compete in a race, okay, a lot of that comes down to the skills and what they know how to do. So if you're just talking peak power output, it's one thing, a short burst or something else. But if you're looking at overall power or energy used, you know, the pro knows how to suck a wheel for 3 hours and then be able to do what he wants to do. And
I'm talking about overall capacity. I'm not just talking about the, like, you know, max power at this certain amount of time. I'm talking about overall capacity, overall KJs in a race. They're going to be higher in a race like the Peace Race or 3 days of Axel, which is not even a Nations Cup, than a quote unquote elite level race here in the US. And to be able to compete at that level, they're like the training volume, I think is a little bit higher than I think a lot of coaches working with kids think is possible or appropriate even.
Okay, but again, I push back that a kid with less power and ability, or less power than another kid that's got more skills and abilities and knows how to use that power is gonna use less power to compete the same distance and still probably beat the kid that used more. So,
but but you're talking about racecraft there, okay, in my opinion, and that's racecraft. Exactly. So, but the way that I took this slide when I looked at it and made the comment is that racecraft is one thing, building up the engine and building the capacity is something else.
Okay, but again, I'm going to talk philosophy for a second. I don't believe that you need to train a youth that's going to ride a 20 or 30 minute, maybe an hour race max on a 5 hour, 100-mile slog ride.
But that's exactly what I am talking about. I'm talking about races that a simple kermesse, a 15, 16 kermesse in Belgium, any kermesse anywhere in Belgium that a 15 and 16-year-old is going to do is going to be at least an hour and a half long, minimum. So we're not I'm talking about this specific slide for me. I'm talking about that high level, elite level junior, or even just below.
I got you. And I'll be happy to talk to you about the philosophy, but down the road sometime. I guess this isn't really the place. I just was trying to understand where you were going. I don't completely disagree with you, but again, it's a different level and a different output. Which is the argument.
Joe,
I'll let that go for now.
And Joe, I would iterate that at this level, we're introducing them to the sport, and we're hoping to get them to the level where they're going to be able to go to something like the Peace Race or large kermesse blocks and things like that. But I would assume at this level, we're not quite there yet. Yes, we're building towards that, and I think that goes into when we start talking about, we already kind of put it out there that they have to become more aware of periodization, training plan design, and that kind of jazz. And going along with that, they also have to understand where they've come from and where they're going, right? And because of that, they're going to be on a trajectory. And this comes around to the basic question I have here in ADM 3. We were still talking a lot about just having team coaches and everything being based around that team enterprise. And here, maybe we have more divergence between the kids involved in the program. I'm just putting it out there. Maybe we have more divergence in them. And so they're going to have to now have more individualization of their activities. And that's where I kind of wanted this discussion to go. Do we want them to still be kind of just all team oriented, or now we're talking about having some individualization to their overall plans?
Are we talking A or B, 4A or 4B?
Well, and the thing is that, are we talking, when you say a team coach, I view that as a team director is different than a team coach.
Right.
Those are two entirely different things. And I also think, like, Richard, you and I are closer in thinking, I think, than we're very similar thinking. My point is that you just need to, like, keep it in mind, especially if it's a kid that expresses an interest in and has the ability to keep going up in level. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
I think that's great. I think that I hearken back to the thing that we got to get kids through the first 14 hours of pedaling in order to give them some level of retention and enthusiasm. And I think I just looked over your website and I see exactly you're doing exactly that, but you're taking those kids that are now there, you're taking the 10% of kids and you're giving them 90% of that energy. And so you're pulling those kids through by the suspenders, which is phenomenal because your retention rate's very high, and I'm sure you're generating enthusiasm down the line. So I guess my question then becomes, how many freshmen on Bainbridge Island see a sophomore or a junior from your cycling program just out randomly and say, I want to do that? Do you get some of that follow up, some of that flow up?
Well, we're just happy to have the 5 kids on the island that ride bikes and want to race bikes.
Okay.
More, to be honest, more the kids see, oh, that's Keolainen who races in the World Tour. I want to be like him. Like, we have that here, which
that's good. That's really good.
Like,
that's extraordinarily
unique. Exactly. And that's something we talked about on one of these earlier calls, is that we all have our little unique environments that we're working in. And, for me to say, hey, this works for me, you guys should do that, I think is like, that's not going to work. So
see, I disagree. I need your ideas. There's
sure
15 of us here, and we need your ideas. We need Freddie's ideas. And I guess the question is, how do we get those 5 squared? How do we get to 25 riders? How do we
now, Richard, we're working at the 10,000 foot level, and we want to focus on this stuff. We'll come back to those issues.
That's fine. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. But Joe's got some good points, and certainly David does too.
Well, so right now, I just want to answer the question. Are we still relying on team coaches, or are we thinking that they're going more towards individual coaches?
And that's where I push back to whether they are where they are in the ADM 4 level.
This is that first level. They're just starting to raise.
Okay. I think you need to remove the word team. And the reason I think you need to remove the word team is this should still be at a kind of a club mentor level to me. And whether it is a facility-based coach or a club coach or something else, it's somebody who's monitoring the kids and helping them to learn the bits and pieces that they need to learn. And that's a whole different group talk that's going to take weeks to go through. Is at what point in somebody's cycling career should they know what? I've got my opinions, and at what level in their cycling career should they, be at XYZ power level to show that they can go to the next level. That's a whole nother bailiwick that's out of this scope.
Yeah, that's part of those next discussions. And we do have, fortunately, I do have the documents that you worked on in 2001 with Sam. I have a copy of that. So at least we have that, which will help us. So can everybody go along with what Dave just said? We have some sort of monitored activities and our club mentored coaches kind of at this level. This is kind of introduction to bike racing, right? They're not like full throttle yet. And we'll just keep it at that.
But what if the experience or the coaching that these younger coaches or inexperienced coaches is incorrect for the model of our sport? If you think of it, it's like, let's say these coaches treat them like they're a track and field athlete, and they're basically saying, we're just going to do half an hour. We're just going to jam for half an hour as hard as we can, and so they're building the wrong kind of athlete for our sport. And so even though, I'd say I kind of see that a little bit with NICA, and that the curriculum that they're offering for some of these kids is a little bit too geared on intensity and not enough on what the sport should be. And you can still make longer, funner mountain bikes fun, but I feel that there's not enough experience in the entry level coaching, and it might start you're guiding down the wrong path. And then as they become more interested in sport, they might realize, oh, this is not the sport I want to be in. It's way too much, or I don't know. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. It's like, do we need to set a better curriculum for the entry level coaches?
Well, that goes into that's the previous.
I agree with. I agree with what Freddie was saying. Is that somebody was asking about what we have going on here, and we have a little junior team, and I coach, actually write training plans for 2 of the kids, and then 3 of the kids, we do rides together, and we teach the right way. This is how you work in a pace line. You point stuff out in the road, all those actual bike riding skills, and which I think is kind of what Freddie's getting at as well. And hey, we're gonna go out for an easy ride, and you don't have to go out and jam all the time, and teach them good habits right away.
That's, I agree with you 100%, Joe, but that's part of why we're here. Yeah. It's part of the reason we're here is to set up an overall program. And the other is to figure out where the program's lacking, what the people who've been doing this for a while understand. And that's where Richard went with. He wants to understand what you do. I want to understand what you do. I want to understand what Durango Dinos are doing, and Boulder, and Bain, and the guys back east.
Well,
they're doing something different than what I do.
Kyle's pedigree is huge. Kyle's got some deep roots in here.
Absolutely.
So so from this standpoint, what we're trying to do right now is just understand the landscape. And then we go in and we say, okay, we don't necessarily cherry pick to start with, but we say, okay, what is that next level? What do we really want to accomplish? Like figuring out the coaching toolkit, or are we trying to figure out the curriculum itself? Oh, maybe the two things actually go hand in hand, right? That's kind of what Joe was getting at, is the two things seem to go really hand in hand, is the curriculum and the coaching toolkit are one and the same in at some level. And then it speaks to what Freddie was getting at. And we just had a discussion yesterday with some NICA coaches, because they're doing exactly what Freddie described. They're throwing a whole bunch of intensity at kids that we've been layering up for the entire pandemic towards being able to actually do a European race program over the summer, assuming that it can happen. And they're unwinding that, right, by just throwing stuff at them that isn't necessary.
I'm not sure.
Can you explain what that is? Sorry, as a NICA coach who's also race, road, and track, I'm just kind of curious what it is specifically that they're doing that you're.
So they're throwing a lot of super high intensity, short duration intervals into riders that are building very, very big engines. It's like saying, okay, you're gonna take your I don't know my cars well enough. Joe could probably speak to it better than me, but you're taking like your muscle car that can go really fast, but it takes a long time to get up to speed. And now you're asking it to do, these short, high intensity bursts that would be better like in a Porsche or something like that.
So just curious, which region were these coaches from?
They're from SoCal.
It's happening in North Cal too.
Is it? Where?
I'd rather not point fingers. I think here is more about trying to understand that in general, the curriculum of coaching needs
so I think
it's
so I don't think that's coming from NICA, because I've gone, it sounds like you're from NorCal. I've been in the NorCal coaching sessions, leadership summits, and they never talk about that. And I was going to say the one thing I would say about NICA is it doesn't focus on performance. Some of the races don't.
And I think that really
if you're actually going to focus on performance, then that would actually give you the right answer.
But guys, I would like to.
We're going off topic here.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to push back, because I looked at the coaching toolkit right here. So what my first step would be to say, I want a Strider bike person to have something that they should be looking at as they teach a kid to ride a Strider bike. Doesn't have to be a whole coaching program, but these are the things that I'd like you to do. Okay. I'd like to see a mentor have 5 paragraphs to read through as to what are the important things about cycling, being a mentor in cycling. A club coach, 5 paragraphs. What are the important things of being a club coach? And those are the things that only we can do. Those are the things we can write, because we know what, I can't do Strider bikes because I've never done it before, but as we go into it, we know what we want to stress to a mentor or somebody who's doing a level 2 or a level 3 program. We know what we want the level 3 beginner coach to be teaching the kids. We know what we want them to learn in their first X number of years of being proficient on the bike. We know what we want them to learn when they first start to race. We don't have to necessarily teach them how to teach that, but we know when they walk out of it at 15 or 16 or 18 years old, what they should know, okay, in order to get better.
Right.
Tell them what they still need to know.
Yeah,
That's where I see all this fitting together.
Right. And you're absolutely correct, Dave. And it's not anything that we're trying to resolve right now. What I'm trying to do is just basically say, is there a coaching toolkit available today? And the answer is no. And so it's something that we need to develop. And what you just outlined is probably the best way to do it, right? Is we look across the network of all of us, and we can actually come up with, okay, we're going to focus on one specific part of the ADM cycle. And there's going to be people that love that space, and they're going to have a lot to say about it. Just like you just said, you're not going to have a whole lot to say about Strider bikes, but there's going to be somebody out there that does. I don't, but there's somebody that will. And then when we get up to this level, clearly we've got a lot of coaches that are super passionate about ADM4 and, 4-cycle type stuff. And it's like, they're going to have a lot to say. They're going to have a lot of input. And there's other people who are just going to have to step back and basically say, okay, you guys understand that space and you guys drive it.
I'll tell everyone here, my passion is not the elite level. Elite athletes are a pain in the ass. I was one. Okay. I don't want to be at the elite level, but I want to be at the level that gets a kid ready to be an elite rider. Okay. So that they know what they don't know. And they know when to ask a question of a coach that might be asking to do something that's questionable. Okay?
Right. And that's where if we can have a structured curriculum with the appropriate coaching toolkit that goes with it, that it provides the continuity across the entire continuum. It's a lot to ask, and it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. And I know where my passion is, and that's where it is.
Right. So we're going to move on because these are big rabbit holes, and we don't want to go too far down them. I just want to settle on, on the training regime periodization. Joe is basically saying don't underestimate their capacity. Remember, this is just that initiation level to ADM4, but I think it's true there too, because you have riders that may be coming through quickly. And then you have coaches that are still working kind of in that club mentored way, that are monitoring the activities of the group as opposed to individual riders for the most part. And Joe, I think, hit on it, is that he has some kids that he's coaching directly, and then some that are coming out and having coached activities along with those other riders, and they're really benefiting from that. All right. So in terms of costs for these programs, Pete put in here somewhere, I think, about having a spreadsheet. Maybe it was further in, but basically building out a spreadsheet of individual costs, and maybe we can use that to make the projections, and that's probably the correct way to go. But the other idea here is to start thinking about school programs too, and this might include NICA programming. So if we can get our hands on some of the budgets, that can help. And some of this goes into for parents being able to actually plan for these things and say, okay, it's going to cost X number of dollars for you to do this, and then you have to think about how you're going to raise those funds and where that money, the money's got to come.
Does that say $1,300 per season for coaching costs?
That would be, I think that's per year. We don't have any from Boulder on tonight, do we? That can answer that directly. No.
If that's not talking about an elite junior, I think that's a lot.
Well, this is within their scope, right? So it's $25 per session, and then however many sessions they're doing.
Oh, that was specifically from Boulder Junior Cycling. Yep. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's definitely not nationwide.
So then, in terms of existing scalable programs in this space, the only thing that I know of is NICA, other than things like Boulder Junior, but those aren't necessarily scalable, right? It goes into Joe's point that we're not going to be able to scale programs from region 1 to region 2. They just we have different resources available in each region, and we have to work with that.
We've got to develop our own program to scale from local to regional to the other, and I think we can set up a model for that. Again, I fall back to the same thing. I think we've got a place where we can set a model for that fairly easily, but we do need to look at it because it is going to be different than NICA.
Right. The NICA model has a lot of really good things to it, but there's some things that I think that can be improved on also. Especially since we're starting at the ground floor, we have nothing to go from. It makes it very easy for us to do a purpose-built design. NICA was not purpose-built; it was organically built. So I think we can use their framework and other existing frameworks to do a purpose-built system. In terms of projected progression, we think about 10 to 20% of these kids are actually going to move forward into, what we'd consider, more international, heading to pro rank realm. And the rest of them, you would hope that they're going to stay here, or they're going to go just straight over to active for life if they decide that they don't want to race. But we don't want to lose them from the sport at this point, or even at ADM 3. We want to try to retain as many as possible. Is there anything else to add to this? Otherwise, we jump into the progressing riders. I know we've gone kind of a while. We've gone down some rabbit holes already. So the qualities of progressing riders, that they have to be persistent, have to have a growth mindset, humility, understanding that there's a lot of work ahead. And Jim actually threw in to change it to good work ethic, which I kind of agree with, but also passion for the sport. But they have to also have the requisite physical and skill sets, which were actually part of the next set, and I brought them down here. Anything else to add? Hearing nothing, I'm going to move on, but I'll put in the good work ethic.
I think I think knowing what lies ahead.
So
okay,
this
I see it there. Okay.
Well, it says understanding there's a lot of work ahead, but knowing that's a little different.
Well, knowing and understanding, I put those in kind of in the same boat myself, but a lot to do, a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is shorter.
I got you.
It's a little more succinct. Great. In terms of the goals for these kids, they're moving through, now we're really talking about graduating them to DET pro teams and maybe even to collegiate programs. But we also want to think of them becoming support staff. And you could even maybe think of the other people from the other group becoming support staff also. And these are eventually going to become directors, mechanics, and everything else you can think of. So you can look across the population of team directors, and a lot of them are former riders, and a lot of them actually came through the junior ranks. Would you say that's true, Joe, being one of them?
Yeah, for sure. Or in my case, those that can't do teach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those that can't teach gym, right? I'm teasing. I'm sorry. I'd go back and teach if I could afford to take that kind of pay cut.
All right. So, and these also become your future leaders and mentors for the clubs and teams. And this kind of, I think, speaks to what Dave was getting at, is you have these layers of people, but you want them to have been in the sport, and you want them to have critical skill sets.
Well, we don't want them to leave the sport. So it right at this ADM switch from A to B in the lower level of 4 to the higher level of 4, we need to make sure that they understand there's a level in the sport for them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's got to go in as part of the coaching.
And I think this goes into, I think Pete made the comment about making sure that leadership is built into the training, so that they're always getting some sort of leadership development as they move through.
Well, one thing that came to me, and it took me years to come up with this, is I went to a youth rowing clinic. And the week before, I ran into a junior that I used to race with. And this wasn't that long ago. We're only talking maybe 10 years ago. And something that came to my mind is I thanked the other junior. And I said, the only reason my Olympics were your Olympics, because the only reason I was there is you were there to race against when I was learning to race. And it's a kind of a deep thought, but I keep trying to tell the kids, if there's nobody there to race, then nobody gets better. And so everybody owns a little bit of each other's development. So if one of your teammates or training friends or somebody else can make it to the top level, you were part of that, and you should own it and be part of that.
Sean, I want Dave to come on Junior Bike Chat and say exactly what he
Well,
just said.
I'd be happy to.
Well, we just
need our
recorded it.
current juniors to, I know, but it needs to be on a bike chat where juniors can hear that. We need our current juniors to understand that not everybody's going to go to the Olympics, not everybody's going to become a pro cyclist, but them being involved in the sport is still important. They have a place and a purpose.
I apologize for my glib answer earlier, but as Dave was talking, and it's like I made a lifestyle choice. I knew what my ceiling was going to be as a rider pretty early on, and I had to sit down with my ego but you know, I was a climbing instructor for years and years, and then like cycling, I haven't found a 12-step program that's cured me of it yet. And I've been able to make, you know, I've been able to stay in the sport and make a quote unquote career out of it. And that pathway exists. So it is, I think, very important that these kids understand that.
Right. And Richard put in here, you know, the idea of looking at scouting models and the idea of merit badges or skill awards and with progress and mastery. And we had talked about this in weeks previous, you know, related to other ADM levels. And I think it's something to re-examine, you know, moving forward. And as we build out some of these other ideas, to look at those types of models for engage, you know, because those are engagement models, right, Richard?
Yes, exactly.
All right. So equipment considerations at this level, you know, we didn't really talk about it all that much. It was really, the bicycle is really dependent on the discipline. I mean, now you're having TT bikes and all this other jazz, and you're having to think about the functionality as opposed to cost. You would hope that more equipment is becoming available to those kids, you know, so that they are getting the appropriate equipment to do the job that they want to do. You know, this is certainly, you know, an issue in our society, as Katie brought up. You know, you still have and have nots, you know, and not every team has access. And we did discuss options of working with pro teams to have the hand-me-down type setups, you know, and Mike Creed was on the call, and it seemed like there may be some openings to kind of approach teams at a little bit higher level and be able to see if we can work out some sort of clearinghouse for juniors just in general. Joe, do you have any feelings about that, since you kind of work with some of those teams? Or Freddie, since you've come out of that space?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the bikes, I mean, I was that kid, you know, I was a kid. It's funny, I just saw a post recently on Facebook when somebody posted an old race when I was a junior, and they said, oh, I remember that kid. That was the kid that always complained that his bike was broken to his dad. I was like, yeah, I was that kid that always had a hand-me-down bike. And so, man, that's why I'm really passionate about the idea that our foundation is giving bikes to underprivileged kids. You know, but it's the hardest thing to do, is to be able to get equipment to kids that want to get into the sport from all demographics. But the better we can figure out a way to minimize the entry to the sport, you know, I think that's going to be a huge gain in numbers of people that are able to participate in this. And it's not so much about, you know, that, you know, let's say Billy and Johnny are both the same level and they're competing for the race and are going to win, but it's more about more kids get the accessibility of the love of the sport and the community and the fun. So yeah, we need to figure out something that could come from on top that basically sets the right curriculum that says these are the requirements that we need for our sport to be able to, you know, I like the $1,200 model. You know, it's like retail $1,200 for a bike, steel wheel, aluminum wheels with steel bikes, and, or, bring it down to a certain level that's affordable for all kids, because not all kids get that carbon bike, and I think it makes a difference. And my goal is, like, I'm a little bit like Dave, but like, even though I love the performance side, I love the idea that we can get more people excited about our sport. And so numbers are more important, because basically it's more kids having fun.
Sean, sorry I was muted there and moving to a different room, but just to kind of tack on to that kind of the hand-me-down model I had mentioned on one of these earlier calls. Again, unique to our area, a couple World Tour pros that are very generous with their old equipment, and that's kind of how I organically, I'm going to say, ended up with a little junior team here, and just some donated equipment from the Logan Owen and Keel Reinen that has filtered down to these kids, and the stuff that the kids didn't need, the local bike shop took in, and that he's going to be able to repurpose, and gave us credit. We've got like $3,000 in credit at the local bike shop that these kids are able to go in and use for chains and tires and tubes and handlebar tape and stuff like that. So that sort of repurposing or hand-me-down model, I mean, it's working well for us, and I think it's, and the kids are psyched to be riding around in World Tour gear, right? Even clothing, like we're talking about bikes and wheels, and clothing isn't exactly cheap. Shoes, like I got 3 kids that are riding around in Logan Owens' old road shoes. So it's worked great for us.
Yeah, I think, okay, so I have a son who's currently wearing Ian Garrison's old shoes. And the thing about it, though, is that's still kind of a, you have to be in the loop thing. You have to have some connection, whether that's through your local junior team, or whether that's, we happen to have raced on the same junior team as Ian did when he was a junior, and that's how we know him. There's a networking piece that's missing when it comes to those hand-me-downs, so that even with the hand-me-downs, there's a haves and a have-nots, so that's one thing to that. I think hand-me-downs are wonderful, but how do we get those to everybody? The other thing, Sean, I'm a big fan of Boyd's Wheels, because the program that they're doing, where they take trade-ins and they refurbish them, and then they give them to not local, but juniors, whoever requests them. And you get a discount on your new wheels when you do a trade-in. How can we get more of the industry to do things like that? When you go in and you trade in or if you trade in your old bike at a local bike shop, most bike shops take those and just sell them as used bikes, but how can we get it so that maybe Specialized, if you bring in a bike to trade in, will give you, say, a 10% discount if that bike then goes to a local junior program?
I don't know that. I mean, that's where, we were starting to have that discussion on one of the calls, and it's a huge rabbit hole. That, and I don't know how to crack open the nut of the industry itself, because we're going to have to do it kind of in a global way. We'll
Boyd's is doing it.
What's that?
Boyd's Wheels is doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be done. Of course, they're a small company, pretty.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here, right? Like, we're establishing this framework and this network, and it seems like at a later date, a really useful avenue to explore, for sure.
Right, and that's what we're looking for, right? Is to see where do we want to put time and energy to open up avenues that are critically, important, right? We're going to have to, as a group, we're going to have to just prioritize things, and then certain people are going to have certain contacts, and they're going to have their own passion for what they want to work on. And if somebody comes along that's super passionate about, trying to crack open the industry and making those things happen, that's great, because it's important to do. But, we also have these things, we have a lot of big picture things that need to be done. I don't want to go too long on this. We do want to finish up. And there's
something
not
at this,
more
Sean,
slides.
something at this level that is not equipment, but does play into the cost of it is host housing opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, we had talked about that, and using Junior Cycling Network is that within that framework. And we do have that. There is warm showers also that exists already.
Yes.
And so, it is something easy for us to explore underneath the framework of Juniors Matters to set up that host housing network. Because a lot of it exists already. It's done under the table, right?
Right. It's about being in the know.
Yep. Yeah. And this just carries it to the next level.
Nothing better than a bucket of water and a towel in somebody's garden shed after a kermesse in Belgium.
No, even better. They give you a little bottle of cologne and you hang out in the gym and you just wipe yourself down.
All right. So in terms of the program considerations, now we're talking about our upper level riders that we're hoping that they're going to go on to pro teams at the end of this. The focus is really on national, international competition, and the local and regional opportunities are just training tools, to provide preparation to do that. And so what we came up with, with Billy on the call and a couple of others, is that about 65% of your time is spent doing local and regional events, but your real focus is at that upper 35%, which is national, international. Do we want to revise those numbers at all, or do we think that's good enough?
Sean, what do you consider regional? What's considered regional?
Regional is, racing within 3 hours of your home base, hopefully, not too much further than that.
Okay.
A day's travel, right? That's what I would consider a region. If you're having to go beyond a day's travel, reasonable day's travel, you're probably, now talking about national.
Yeah, regional wouldn't necessarily be having to spend a night somewhere or go
Right.
the day before the race. If there were a couple of races in a row, it'd be like going from Detroit to Chicago or Milwaukee for a weekend and spending a night or two and then getting home at dark 30 in the morning on Sunday or Monday, however you look at it.
So are we talking ideal? Like what we want is an ideal?
This is ideal.
Well, I mean, ideally, in my perspective, would be as much local as possible, and and basically, hopefully, switch that regional and the national 25 and bring it into the 15% of local, and maybe also drop to 10% from the international. I mean, if you look at the demographics of where most of the kids that are, we seem to have more numbers. You can look at North Cal, you could look at Southern Cal, you could look at Colorado, you could look at, the East Coast in certain areas. The more local you get, the more, for some reason, the more kids you get.
Well, that was the 4A, right? So you're building up your population base, and these are the kids that are now they're moving forward to the professional ranks, and you want to give them more opportunities to be racing at higher levels, right?
Why do you think Netherlands and Belgium do so well?
Right. No, I get that. So you would say to bring down the regional and split the regional and local a little more evenly.
Yes, I mean, if we're really thinking ideals, because if you look at Belgium and Holland and these countries that are developing a lot for how many people they actually have, that there's something there with that.
So
I agree with what Freddie's saying, because if you told a Belgian that they had to go 3 hours to a bike race, they would shake their heads and go, no, that's too far. So
again, and I agree with you, Joe, and I agree with what Freddie's saying also. The real issue is that when we do local races, at least out on the West Coast, a local race is 5 riders in each of the junior categories.
We're not talking about what we have today. We're talking about what we want.
I understand. I'm trying to give them a perspective. And
Right now, you only have 90%, Sean.
And when you get to regional, at least you're starting to pick up a field that's worth having. And I know ideally, I'd still sit back to, I'd like to see regional a little bit higher than local, but regional shouldn't necessarily be every weekend. Regional should be once or twice a month. Just like international is going to Europe for a month when the racing is good. That's just the way I look at it. It's okay.
I mean, that was basically how the numbers got formulated.
I still think 25 and 10% for national and international is too high.
So
I agree. That means, you're saying 1 out of 4 races basically should be at the national level. That seems not doable. We don't.
It's
I mean, we're talking ideals, right?
This is ideal.
It's not just races, it's being with the people. You're with the local people 90% of the time, well, 80% of the time. The racing is only a portion of that. You're with your regional people maybe 10 or 15% of the time. We need to get the national folks all together so that there's something that's meaningful to really be able to see, let the cream come out, but still have the milk being able to be part of something that is meaningful to them, if you follow where I'm going with that kind of analogy.
We can always come back to this stuff later. I mean, if there's still disagreement, I can put it out as a survey. we could get everybody to put in their numbers, and we can come up with a consensus.
But again, it's how you ask the survey question. We'll get you. You know how surveys work.
Yes, I do.
I guess if you're going to propose the same question in Belgium, you'd probably say that the same number for regional, the same number for national.
The problem is all of Belgium is a region here. You take all of Belgium and it's a single region.
Can you guys hear me? It's
Yeah.
Happy.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Happy.
My pleasure. I'm on my iPhone, which means you're not going to get much of a visual.
Yeah, we don't have visual on most of the people. So, but we're kind of stuck on the last bit of high performance programming. We're kind of stuck on how much people should be racing at the local, regional, national, and international level, and Freddie's trying to drag the numbers down towards local.
John, think about it.
I'm on Freddie's side. If this is an ideal that we're talking, you want to be able to race locally as much as you possibly can. And to Dave's point, I would argue that if you have more local racing, that's going to raise the level eventually.
Give me a number.
I don't know.
What do I type
You're
in
the
the
number
box?
guy?
Freddie,
I look at it this
I mean, here's the other question, Sean. I think it has to be by region. If you're living in Southern California, this might be more ideal. If you're living in Arkansas, this model doesn't work.
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
this is a problem with our country, right? Our country's heavily diverse. But let's put some ideal numbers in here, and then we can make a disclaimer at the bottom.
Based on what you guys defined as local races and regional races, every race we do from here in North Carolina is regional. We only have 1 or 2 races a year that would be considered local for what you guys just defined as local.
So do your kids ride with a club, with the seniors and stuff in a club in the Masters?
You mean, do they do group rides?
Yep.
Yes.
I consider that local. I consider that a local race. But
Well,
again,
I understand that, but they don't. As kids, they don't see that as a race for them because
Yeah.
they have no chance against those masters guys who are on not junior gearing, and they see that as fun, and it's great to get their mentorship sometimes, sometimes not, but
and when they beat one of the other guys that they've never beaten before, that doesn't matter to them. They don't talk about that all week long the next week.
Now, usually, this is happy. You're beating an old fart, you just beat an old fart. They don't know who the old fart necessarily was.
And
you beat a new kid.
they know who he
That's
was.
regular.
That's all right. I like that next slide that you just hit, Sean.
Well, yeah. So let's just try to get some numbers in here, and I've got a disclaimer down here. Freddie, you seem to have you had particular bias about the numbers.
I mean, I'm coming from my son's experience in soccer, where he's playing at the top level of soccer, and we probably have here in the Bay Area probably have one of the most robust soccer regions in the country, other than LA and maybe New York. But we literally packed the whole team and flew down to San Diego and played, because of their ranking, played the same teams that are in Northern California down in San Diego at a college tournament, because it was the premier college tournament of the season, when they could have literally just hung out in the neighborhood and played against the same team. And so it's that same idea. It's like, why are we shoveling our kids over to San Diego?
That's another issue.
But it's very similar.
Freddie, it's because the college coaches are lazy. The college folks want all the kids to come to them, and they can look at them all at once.
I mean, but let's be real. Like, I don't even think we're never going to have the numbers that soccer has. I mean, you're going to have to travel to see other athletes at your ability level. Am I wrong? I mean,
if we do our job properly, we will have the numbers.
Of soccer, Sean?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. But we have to do our job. If we don't do our job, we're going to stay right where we are. It'll never go anywhere.
So,
Sean, you never struck me as a closet optimist.
I mean, I think that's the 25-year plan. I mean, that's great. It'd be amazing, but
I said this is a 10-year plan, at least.
I said 25 years.
So local has to be much higher.
Give me a number. I don't care what the numbers are.
It's got to be 50% at least.
So you want,
and regional's got to be in the 25 to 30%. And I'd actually leave it at 30. National's got to be down. You got to go national a couple of weekends a year just so that you get the best together. And that's something we don't have. So that's something that has to be worked for. So that's got to be 20%. And then the really elite need to get that international experience.
Well, these are your really elite riders.
Okay.
Yeah.
These
It's
are the really
still
elite
going to
riders.
be 50% local. Because nobody can do more than that unless they're on a paid team. Ask Kathy.
Unless you're going to nationals, you're not going anywhere. From my perspective, with kids coming up, they got to make at least one nationals to show they have the ability to race on that level in order to go to an international squad.
Okay, so we're talking about an ideal framework here where we've also modified the entire event schedule. We're talking about an ideal here. We're not talking about like what we got. We know what we got is not right.
So
we want like an ideal.
Yeah, because you're at 115%. That's definitely not right.
Okay.
Let's fix it.
Sean, what is a racing season to you? How many weeks?
A racing season? I mean,
for somebody at this level.
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, you know, that's where I wanted the group to come to a consensus. I would say March to September.
So what is that? That's 8 months, right? And you're not going to be peaked for that whole 8 months, but it's going to be 8 months.
No, it's the latter bit, right? The latter 2 months where you're really looking at the.
Maybe. It might be
I would
the
say
2 months. If Nationals your big event and it's in July, then it's the middle 2 months.
Or you're
I'm just
going
asking for a span of time that we're looking at when you're going to be competing and racing, and everybody can answer that. I mean, it's an open question. So in general, I don't think it's quite 8 months. I think it's a little bit less. But again, that's just my opinion. And then it comes down to how you periodize your week, or how you periodize your season as to how much racing you do at which level. Okay. Nationals got to be about, that's fine.
How about we do something like that?
Perfect. God, you're good.
And then you better throw in family vacations as well.
Isn't that the international travel?
That's how my wife drives the van.
Oh, I thought this was going to be an easy slide.
It's a good slide. I like how you pushed it out, because it's going to vary depending on where you are.
Okay. All right. Okay. So who's running these programs? You know, it seems like you're now moving away from your local club or team, and you're going more towards regional or nationally oriented clubs and teams. But it really seems like composite team programs have a lot of utility because they have less overhead associated with them. But you can also have coach or private race trips that are very focused in their design to do certain things. But this also layers in with regional or national team selection process type programs, or all-star programs, which might be the same as like your regional programs. I'm not sure how those things fit together. Anything else to add about who's actually running these programs?
Who's doing it or who should do it?
I mean, I guess you could say who should do it.
I'd leave the slide the way it is for now, but I think that's worthy of discussion.
This goes back.
You're breaking up, Happy.
Quality of coaching. This goes back to the issue of how do you define quality of coaching?
Well, yeah, that's
an elite lift.
That's another slide. That's further down.
So to go to U.S. Wrestling's national championships at a high school level or under, you go with basically a state team that you try out for, and then they go as state team. And that might be a way to do it. I don't know. I'm just telling you it's a different way.
Right. I mean, we used to have a model that was similar to that. We had a selection process to go to the national championships, and you kind of raced for your region. I mean, you would be listed as part of your region, even if you raced in your club kit. So, I mean, that's something that we could discuss in the future, right? I mean, that goes more into beyond just this simple framework stuff.
In the Northeast, we had a simple requirement: how many people could fit in Al Schofield's van? And he would pack all the kids in that he deemed appropriate, like George Kincappy, and off we go to nationals. And the kids from his van would do very well.
Right, and that's how it's working now, right? Is that you basically, whoever wants to go, whoever shows up is what you get. But at some point, you're going to have too many people for that process.
You see, the problem is we don't define people out earlier. We start defining people out later. And I think if we knew who had the talent earlier, and most of us do know who has the talent, then do we ration the resources?
Well,
and make it
Sean,
go
if the local and regional model is working well, then you're probably already forecasting who's going to be able to go national better.
Right. So when you're talking about who's doing it, that's where the selection they're selecting through already, is what you're saying.
Well, basically, I'm saying that I think we still should have the local be involved at this level.
The local teams.
Yeah, they should be part of the whole process.
So you think even at this level, a local team should be part of the process?
Varies on the level of each given team. So anybody coming from Joe, I'd probably believe it. Anybody coming from Freddie, I'd probably believe it.
Well, I mean, yeah, basically, if the regional program, if the ideal regional and local program is working, these local teams are developing the right athletes that can go to the national level.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So then you really don't need the regional teams become some sort of probably all-star type program at that point.
It depends on how you want to set up the program, and that's kind of where I was going with that USA wrestling model. Is there should be some, I think of what was it, La TB or whatever, the junior stage race in Canada years ago, that they brought in kind of not necessarily national teams, but club teams or regional teams and other things. And I think that that's an important middle step that we don't have here now.
Well, we've taken teams to Abitibi and to Ireland, and they were more of a composite type approach, but you'd almost say they're almost like an all-star type program, because you're selecting riders that need teams to go, because there's not necessarily, at least at this time, there's not enough teams that have enough resource base to be able to support squads in that space.
Well, yeah, I agree. And some of those races need to have, scholarships, if for the want of a better term, to bring in some of these composite and regional teams. So, Katie sent me a quick note on chat asking about, how you take local training races / training rides and help kids get discovered or earn USAC points.
Videos off.
And the bottom line is having a local spotter or identifier that can help pull those kids through. So.
Yeah, and that's where the coaches really come into play, right? Is the coaches should have the network, and they should be trusted enough that you're not going to be sending through somebody that doesn't have the skill set to be able to do what needs to be done.
And after a year or two, you can figure that out. Whether a coach is sending one of his paid riders or if he's sending somebody who's really good. But again, it's just having trusted individuals involved. Like I said before, if it was Freddie sending somebody or Joe sending somebody, I'd probably believe it. If it was some guy I don't know, then I'd probably be skeptical.
Right. And that goes, I think, into some of these further down pieces. But in terms of the types of events, and we've talked about this, it seems like it's pretty much going to look identical then to that earlier state. That the events now really, the coaches are now selecting the events appropriate for the progression of the athletes, and the local and regional events training, and then the national, international come the real focus. I'm going to mute Joe again.
Sometimes I get the feeling they're picking local and regional events that are not necessarily comparable to what they'll be racing at nationals, but it's a way of getting their kids through the filter.
Right, and we had some discussion about this. Tad was really talking about what they do with what they've done within teams that he's been working with, is that the international level riders will help the regionally based riders to learn more skill set, right? To provide them opportunities to do well in the regional races. But it's also, it can now be, now you look at it as being a training ride.
He said, wow.
What's that mean?
Credit score.
I
checked our credit scores and I told him what
and then you need to have off the bike activities to build self-sufficiency and reliance. There was some discussion about actually layering in mechanic training and things of that nature, and then using camps and clinics to really help raise the bar for the individuals. Again, I come back to what Pete Weber kind of threw in, was having a robust pyramid in place that's directed from your NG, probably from your NGB at this point, to assist with that process.
Hey, Sean, we've got an awful lot of feedback from somebody.
I think that's from Happy. Is that maybe from Happy? I don't know. I can't.
Happy and Daniel, I think.
Yeah. Daniel Hastings.
It's coming from Daniel's side. Oh, it's gone now. Okay.
I'm sorry. Was I off mute?
Is there any other questions about the types of events they're doing? What's that, Happy?
I was going to say, do we need to create a regional executive committee that fulfill the selection process? Because we've got nothing like that here in New York. Basically, it's Century Road Club in Manhattan and Casino in Queens, and they both looking for bragging rights and delete their own children in the process to get them.
Do you have any comments, Dave, about that?
So do we need?
So, I mean, in terms of an executive committee for doing kind of that selection process, I mean, that's something that's certainly worth considering, especially if you're talking about, scarcity of resources and sending teams out to do certain things and things of that nature. But, and that's a question that people have specifically regarding like the ODA project, which is a classic example of that, right? It's now you have a lot of people coming in and they're asking to go into the program. Is how is that selection made about who's actually going into that program? And that's where, you want something that's fairly transparent. And yeah, maybe there needs to be an executive committee made up of, the coaches that are really running these programs, right? That can provide input.
Actually, Sean, and selection's always a bear. So at the lower levels, until we get up to the levels of world championships and world championship teams and Olympic teams and other stuff, I think that and normal coaching staff can deal with that. If it's below that level, we're good. When we get to that world championship level, you've got to take the personal coaches out of it.
No,
it definitely has to be a different group. There has to be a set criteria of what you're looking for that has got a little bit of rubber room in it, a little bit of flexibility. But right now, that's well beyond the level of what we're trying to do, but that needs to be done.
Okay, so it needs to be a consideration that we take up for the future. And leave it at that. Okay, so in terms of the coach and director considerations, there was some discussion about this, but it really seems that these are your elite level coaches and directors who really understand the business, who are running these things. And then, associated with that, Larry Nolan has said this a couple times, is we need to make sure that we're mentoring coaches up through the process and providing apprenticeship opportunities. Which then goes into the coaching toolkit component that we don't have. Is there anything else that we need to consider about the coaches that are working at this level?
Yeah, we forgot about the athletes.
In terms of what?
We need elite level coaches and directors that understand what it takes to be an athlete
Well, that was,
But not just the freaking business. I'm sorry.
I think this was Joe's comment, and I think he meant that in as part of the business.
And I'm good with that, but it's got to be in there. If you don't, if you don't have it in there, then people are not going to see it.
Okay.
And you know, this has to be athlete centric. It can't be business centric. That's the problem with this USAC. And that's a whole problem with development. It's not athlete centric. Damn, people want to make money. I respect that, but it's got to be athlete centric. I'm sorry.
I think maybe, Sean, a word other than business. I think I understand what that. It wasn't me that made that comment. It might have been Joe. The other Joe, Boulder Joe.
Lewis.
Yeah, Joe Lewis. Maybe just the use of the word business. Maybe try just a different. I understand. I think I understand and agree with the point Dave's making on that.
Joe, yeah, no disrespect meant to anybody. The business portion of cycling is very important, but we're trying to develop athletes. And
yeah, I completely agree with the point that you're making. It's just a verbiage choice, I think.
Yeah, I guess I agree, and that's probably my whole biggest frustration with USAC or the feds or NORBA or anybody else, or or NICA, is that if you don't have a passion, you don't understand what it really takes. And we've got people, I don't know that they have the passion. I know this group has a passion, or you wouldn't be here. So I'm preaching to the choir. Sorry.
I just changed it out to be who are athlete centered and understand what the job entails. You had something happy to add? Oh, he's off. Okay. And then we'll try to wrap up here as quick as we can. So we have the coaching toolkit, which doesn't exist. Same kind of issues as before. This is going to be a large task. And then in terms of existing scalable models, I mean, I don't know that there's anything that's really scalable. And I just wanted to put out that, two key components is we want it to be process oriented and a sustainable model. And that's I don't know that we're ever going to reach that, but it is a goal. But we do have AMED, the composite programs that are based around that kind of model that seem reasonably good. We have national deemed programs, and I was just putting on any nationality that we can draw from that could provide us that type of model that we can look at for the future, and then any club or team models that seem to kind of fit in that space. We certainly don't have to come up with it today. I mean, but if anybody knows of anything right offhand that's like, oh, that's a great model, we should just put it in there, Hearing nothing, I'll assume that we don't think those things really exist right now. And this is where Pete Weber said on cost, to make a Google sheet with a budget and with a list of expenses. And then we can have multiple columns for different categories of athletes, which I think is a good way to go. Joe sent me over a pile of numbers associated with different levels of teams that he's worked with in the past. I built out some numbers for at the club level. And then I actually got some numbers from Gavin Chilcott for World Tour. So I have everything ranging from putting together your basic bike club all the way to World Tour in terms of numbers. But that's at the club level. That's not at the individual costs, which is a little different, a little distinct from that. But I think Pete's idea is good and something that we could probably come up with pretty easily. In terms of funding considerations, we had a pretty good discussion about this last time. And and Mike Creed had some things that he tossed in about having alumni donor pools, or basically a self-tax on the alumni in programs. And that goes along with, your traditional kind of corporate donations, grants, individual fundraising, events, fees that, here Pete Weber's talking about, but also pledge funds from more advanced ridership. And Mike was talking about how world tour riders are setting up a pledge funds, at least in Canada, it sounds like, to help out provincial riders to raise the bar. But then David Tom talked about how in Fast Freddy Foundation, you guys have used that as a backbone for donations for directed projects. And it seems like we can do that within the 501c3 status of the YCA also, to be able to, not just draw in individual donations, but be able to draw in matching donations for specific projects that we might want to take on as a group. Is there anything else that we might want to add to that list? I mean, what Pete throws in there kind of covers the rest of the bases as far as I know. Again, these are working documents. We can add to them later. And this is kind of overarching too, right? Because this can apply to all ADM levels.
Hey, Sean, are you set up on Amazon for their matching or their Amazon Awards program?
Yeah, I'm not set up in there yet, but yeah, that's another one. There's a bunch of that kind of stuff, right?
I'll switch over to you. Get in there. I use Amazon way too much.
We use it a lot also.
When we pull it on out. Sure.
And then the qualities of the graduating riders was actually a huge list.
Probably. Let me see it. Let me feel it.
And Joe came up with,
don't bite me.
added to it.
Don't pull it.
It really boils down to,
Okay.
once they have the
Well,
requisite.
if you want to pull it, take a piece of toilet paper and put it.
I'm going to mute Katie there. She's helping out one of her children. Once you have the requisite physical and skill sets, physicality and skill sets, Mike Creed talked a lot about self-sufficiency and making sure that the guys can actually do things on their own. And then, growth mindset. Mike talked a bit about having an adventurous spirit, willing to try and learn new things,
Right.
and then being flexible, ability to deal with all the chaos that happens in our sport, and then ability to exist within the team sport atmosphere. I was trying to cut down on that. It was almost a page of material, and we could certainly add things back in here, but that seemed relatively comprehensive.
They really need, they have to be able to present themselves. Okay, they have to be able to look somebody in the eye and shake hands and represent.
I think that fits in the professionalism category.
Yeah, and that's something I stress with the youngest students I work with, is that if I introduce them to somebody, I'm not necessarily just introducing them to a friend. Might be the national team coach or somebody else. So they need to always be ready for that.
Sean, something you could add to the flexibility, ability to deal with chaos, maybe flow mindset.
What is that? Flow?
Flow mindset. I don't know if you heard that term.
Nope.
Look it up.
Oh, Freddie, you're too new wave for us.
So we have growth mindset and flow mindset. Can they be in the same person?
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, I guess flexibility and growth, because, you have to be able to grow, you got to be flexible. So, yeah.
All right. Is there anything else any big missing holes from this component? I mean, we've been on the phone for over 2 hours now, so I would hope that we don't have any gaping holes in this discussion.
John, you're doing a great job. I really appreciate it. It's not something I can do.
I'm just trying to herd the cats. That's it.
Well, just meow.
Don't make that.
And somebody had to do this, right? I mean, I wanted it done 5 years ago, but here we are.
We all did. 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yes, we're literally 15 years behind where Canada is. They did this 15 years ago. So anything else? Any other big picture items that we've missed? If not, if you think of something after the fact, just send it in and we'll get it incorporated. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of package this up. I'll try to get it boiled down to like a 10 to 15 minute presentation. I'll generate that, post it online, and then I'm going to compile the entire group of stuff together and try to make it as cohesive as possible and as short as possible. And then I'll present that to the group and we can go through it and tear it apart. And then that'll become our working framework for the next stage where we're going to have to, the big thing that we have to think of next is what do we want to do? What do we want to try to accomplish and what buttons do we want to push?
So Sean, I would like to push that after you get this together and we go through it, that we sit down and we make an outline of how to accomplish it. And then make some assignments and let each of us pick the things that we're most passionate about and try to put the pieces together.
Any other comments about that? I mean, because part of it is going to, that we're in communication with the NGB and they're going to want ownership of certain pieces of this, I'm sure. And I want to know how hard to push back against that.
I don't need to state my opinion. I think you already know.
Yep. But we'll try to generate a consensus on that part of it. And Rob already knows my feelings. So
I would like to recommend that anybody here who hasn't seen it to try to find on Facebook. It's Ornery Old Cyclists, and there's a post from John Eustace that was put on there after he had spoken with with USAC. And it's actually a very, very well written article, but it's thought provoking. And just to kind of look at the upper end of where we're trying to get kids from starting to where they've got something to go to. So it was kind of interesting, and Sean has seen it. I know that. I'm not sure if he completely agrees with what I'm saying right now, but it's worth trying to find if you can find it. So
the only issue, and I think Joe and I had talked about this, is that a lot of those individuals are not engaging in the sport any longer. And so it makes it very difficult for them to understand the relevance of what they're saying.
Well, thank you guys. From me, I am sorry I pontificated as much as I did, but if you can't tell, I'm my heart bleeds for this stuff.
I want to thank everybody for coming on. I'm going to leave the document open. So if you think of anything, I can see people are still in it. You can go ahead and just kind of type in your comments and we'll try to get things added or whatever. But I am going to, after I eat, I'm going to try to sit down and hammer this out and generate a little podcast on it. All right. Thank you very much for coming on. Unless anybody has anything last minute to say, I think we're done for the evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Have a good night.
I'm off.